Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. Very excited. We got Jim and Greg rejoining us. It's been a little while since we've had either of you on, so I am stoked for this conversation. Now, while I am excited, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we drop these on Fridays so that you can watch them every single week. It's going to be a good day. Now, we haven't talked to you guys in a while, so let's get some intros and then we'll dive into the conversation. We'll start with Jim. You're on top. 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff. Give her.
Morning, British Columbia, Canada. Senior officer with the RCMP, bike rider. Not as good as Sean, but I have fun. Husband, dog owner, and big fan of the shows.
Bam. I like it. Greg, how about yourself?
I was very well practiced. Greg Everett. I run a company called Catalyst Athletics, which I put out educational content for the Olympic sport of weightlifting coaches and athletes. I coach world championship level weightlifters, and married, daughter, couple dogs, couple cats. Just out here living the dream in Central Oregon.
I like it. Sean, how about yourself? What are you doing out there?
Everything's good out this end. We got a boatload of snow still coming down. Last night we got a bunch and it just hasn't stopped. So be out on the Fat Tower bike later today, suffering.
I like it. Nothing quite like a little bit of suffering. I've just recently been out looking for hiking boots, and that has been suffering in and of itself. Just trying to figure out like all the different kinds, and I've been finding all kinds of new stuff that I didn't know about earlier. Lots of different companies, lots of different stuff. But yeah, it's gonna be good. That's gonna be fun. Now, I have a question right off the bat for you guys, and it's been kind of rattling around the back of my head. It has to do kind of with everything that we're doing. We have been pushing, betterment. We've been pushing this idea that you can learn and grow and build and all these things to the world. And I'm wondering how you guys have seen not only the collective, but on the internet, at least in my mind, I've seen this shift in the last little while where there's a lot more positive content that could just be my feed. But what do you guys see when you're looking at the world as it is right now on the internet, social media, that kind of stuff? Are you seeing the same kind of thing, this shift towards positivity? Greg, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Oh man, I wish I was seeing that. I don't know that I'm seeing necessarily a larger percentage of positivity relative to the negativity and cynicism and pessimism and criticism and all these isms. Um, but I do think there are certainly more people engaging and producing positive content. So I do think the amount of it is growing. I guess I'm just not sure whether or not the relative percentages of the two are changing. And I think, and maybe this is my own kind of innate cynicism talking, but it seems to me that it's kind of the natural order of things to have a relatively small group of people who are genuinely and sincerely interested in helping people and providing contributing value to other people, while a lot of the, kind of the larger percentage tend to be the ones who like to sit and point fingers and consume without that reciprocal contribution. And I would love to see that change. I think that's one of the issues we're constantly dealing with in positions that we, the four of us here and others uh, like to be in. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I can't say that I've necessarily seen it happening yet.
Raj, Jim, what are you thinking?
I would say an emphatic no, but I guess I gotta watch my comment and see, or my content and see what I'm actually looking at. But um, I I think with the amount of negative things, it's given me a little perspective to dig into that a little more and just figure out what that content is and where it's coming from, and figuring out the algorithms. And like Greg said, it's not a lot of people. It's not a big thing. So I've kind of understood that a little more. That while the amount of content is significant, the origin of that content is pretty minuscule. So um, I think, like Greg said as well, the ability to go find positive comments, or sorry, positive content, and people doing what you guys are doing here has also gotten a lot better. There's more people doing it, so that's positive. I just got to figure out a way to get that built into the algorithm, I guess. But yeah, short answer, no. But there's a lot of good stuff out there. So
Interesting. Sean, what are you thinking?
I agree with the guys. I don't think that the percentage has increased. I just think that the volume has increased. And so there's more people on social media putting out more messages, and therefore you can bump into it more easily. And by it, I mean the message that you're looking for, or the message that you want to hear, I suppose. And so it's easy to find the messaging that you want to hear right now. And that in and of itself is a bit of a problem as I see it, because if it's easier now to find something that you agree with, it's easier now to stay where you're at. And so, with less messaging out there, I think that there's less refinement out there, and therefore it's less easy to seamlessly slip into the idea that fits your agenda for today. And so now that there's a massive proliferation of opinions out there, it's easy to find the opinion that you agree with. And so I think the real challenge of today is not whether there's enough positive content or enough negative content out there. It's finding the right content for you and then adding an extra 5% challenge to it. So it's easy to find the thing that you want to hear. You've got to go find the thing that kind of meets what you want to hear, and then dig into that extra 5% that you maybe don't agree with, or that maybe pushes you a little bit further, or challenges you. So I guess to round it out, what I'm saying is this: it's easy to find the stuff you want to find out there. Go find the stuff that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, is what I would like to put across.
That is an interesting thought pattern. I'm wondering about finding how to find the line, I guess, between pushing your boundaries just a little bit and not following people who you look at and go like, that guy's a that's a goof. Like, I don't, there's no reason I should follow this person. But at the same time, like, should you? And then are you then not like feeding into their negative concepts, their negative minds, or the, let me never phrase, not negative, um, the outside the box of your own personal box. Greg, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I like what Sean said, but it made me think of a lot of things, and this is a real dilemma in my mind. Um, because of the way social media platforms are structured, right? They're going to continue serving you more and more of what you view. So, do you create your own little echo chamber and basically curate a world in which you only hear things you already believe and think and agree with, and therefore the world seems great, you're happy, everything's cool? Um, do you go out and, as Sean said, find that extra percentage outside of that to kind of keep you in check and keep you in touch with quote unquote reality? But I think the distinction that has to be made is between, what Chance, you were saying is kind of like negative, just objectively poor content, right? It's not contributing anything. It's not educational. It's not that it's something you simply disagree with. It's just horrible content all around. And it's popular and it's viewed because of that weird morbid curiosity that we tend to have as people, where we want to go watch a car crash video or whatever. So, well, that's not helping me out. That makes me feel bad in the end of the day. So are we balancing out what we like already and what we want to hear with things that challenge us and make us think? That's great. Or are we instead finding this kind of content that's really not helping anybody other than the people producing it, who are getting all these likes and views? And in doing so, basically training these platforms to continue serving more and more of it and reward that content more and more, further pushing out the more valuable, useful, helpful content. So yeah, I don't have the answer, but I do my best to stay off that stuff and not. It's like, I'm not going to go patronize a business that's run by someone I think is doing terrible things with their money, right? So I look at it the same kind of way. I try to not help people who are creating content that I think is, vile for whatever reason. Even if I might have this little piece of my head is like, well, I'm kind of curious what this is all about.
Interesting. Jim, what are you thinking?
Yeah, the lots of different buckets you could put the content into. I guess there's obviously bad stuff, and I'll be honest, I get sucked into that a little once in a while, but I try and ignore that as well. But I do curate the stuff I'm looking at on social media to make sure that I don't get into my own little echo chamber, and I do see, or at least subscribe to both sides of the argument. I do enjoy looking at this problem and then seeing every different angle around it and different groups or different people's perspectives. So I guess I curate my own mess. Would be a good way of seeing it. I see the fringes, and then you have to kind of work from there to see what is more accurate information than the fringes of the 360-degree view I'm trying to curate. But yeah, no, I wouldn't want to I guess over curate my perspective either. So.
Absolutely. Sean, where are you coming to from this?
I think the internet is like a language. I think social media is like a language, a new language, a language that you've got to learn. And funnily enough, the internet that we're all in right now continues to evolve as a language. It becomes richer, more complex, and more nuanced, and sometimes almost indecipherable or undecipherable, depending on what part of the internet you get yourself into. So I was thinking about that this morning, not this conversation, but the topic of know your world, or how do you know your world? And you've kind of got to sit down and do a lot of reflection or thinking. But more correctly, you've got to establish what your language is. And so, because Greg was coming on the show this morning, I was thinking about how I kind of framed it up in my head as how Greg, at some point, when he was much younger, had to learn the language of powerlifting, had to learn the language of lifting, had to learn the language of weights. And so one day he didn't know anything about it. And then the next day he started his journey. And along the way, he's developed a vocabulary. And it started out as a baseline vocabulary that allowed him to communicate with other people. And now he's gone much further beyond that point, where he has a very sophisticated language in his industry, or within his passion, or within his life, because he spent a lot of time thinking about it. And he spent a lot of time relaying it to others, trying to find different ways to explain how to do one thing and describe it 10 different ways to 10 different people. And I believe that's what it takes to understand anything. You have to learn the language of what you're entering into. You have to think about the variety of different ways that you can communicate it to others. And once you've learned your world and described it to other people, well, now you're at a position where you can better interact on a number of different subjects. Like the internet as a whole, you cannot, at, unless you're a genius and you've been on the internet since you were 4, being primed to become a social media expert. Chances are at 18, if you've been into the internet for half a year trying to become a social media influencer, as the example, you're definitely doing it wrong. Definitely. Because you don't understand the language yet. At least you don't understand my language. But if you spent a day or two getting to know me, you'd now understand an entire slice of the internet that you're missing. And that is the key again. The language, how deep you want to learn it so that you can deeply communicate to others and to yourself. So again, back to Greg. At one point, he knew nothing about lifting. Now he knows a ton about lifting, and not only knows, but knows how to communicate it to others. So, uh, I guess to round out my point, it would be this: social media to me is a language that needs to be learned. And the language only gets richer the more you try to understand it. So the flash in the pans, the overnight wonders, the 19-year-old social media influencer who's taking photos in front of the Ferrari, none of that matters to me. If they haven't been in the game long enough, it's less interesting to me.
This brings up an interesting point, but I'm gonna hold on to it for a second, and then I'm gonna ask you this, Greg. I think you put out a post a little while ago. I'm pretty sure it was you about entertaining versus educational content, and the fact that people would prefer to see entertaining stuff rather than educational. Might not have been you. I can't quite remember, but a friend of ours had friend of the show had commented on it, and from ShepDev, and he was like, "Can confirm, people do prefer educational versus or prefer entertaining versus educational." Due to the fact that he puts out videos of him shooting his kids up with Nerf guns, like all tactical style with flashbangs and stuff. But when he's out on the range doing educational content, that stuff gets way less views than the Nerf stuff, and it's like easily visible. It's not even small. And so I'm wondering, how do we bridge the gap between the educational and the entertaining?
That yeah, I mean and that's the story of my life as a content creator is how do I communicate information that is inherently dull, right? Like my most successful book is a weightlifting book. It's 250,000 words, 800 something photos and tables and all this stuff. So it's a textbook. How do you make that palatable to the broadest range of people possible rather than this thing that they feel forced to slog through and don't really get much from because their mind is wandering every two sentences? And the way I've approached it for years is this idea that you kind of have to infuse the information with personality, right? You have to be a person, a character, not a caricature, right? So you're not being a clown and acting silly and being an entertainer first and foremost, but you are a character. You are a personality that people can see, relate to, identify with. You have a personality, you have a sense of humor, you have hopefully some degree of charm and wit, all these things that you would want in any kind of interpersonal interaction with somebody. And being able to put that into the pages of a book or into a 90-second video or an article or whatever these things are. And I think fortunately that has gotten me a lot larger of an audience, and at the same time it turns off certain people because, like one-on-one interaction, not all of us like all of us, right? So you're friends with people because you guys get along, you have similar ways of looking at the world. I have a lot of people who really love what I do and the way I do it, and there are plenty out there who do not like it, and they interpret what I'm doing and how I'm doing it in ways that are unintended. And that's a risk you take if you put any kind of personal touch on information. But I think that is the way that you get it interesting, and give it enough of an entertainment bent that it is more palatable to more people.
Interesting, Jim. You got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it is a weird shift in how we consume information. I guess I'll clarify. I'm not a social media influencer by any means. I'm looking at this from the outside, and the thing that seems to work, I guess, in what I'm looking at anyway, is volume. Um, Instead of a singular trusted source of information that what used to be, it's almost a shotgun method, and it's something's going to stick, but you're not even going to get looked at if you don't put a lot of stuff out there. And you might have to put up 10 entertaining things to draw people in to get that one educational thing, and then maybe the educational thing will take off at some point. I'm just thinking from a work perspective. There's the need to put out information on social media that is factual, that is something that not entertaining, but we still have to draw people in and put up the puppy photos and that type of thing. So yeah, I'm not even sure what the marketing answer is, but what I have personally seen is that there has to be a little bit of something for everybody to get you in, because there is so much content out there, and you are competing with well, even just this show, like you're competing with people and companies who have the money to put a lot of stuff out there. So If you don't have at least a reasonably um, commensurate amount of things to compete with that, you're not going to get seen. So just my thoughts.
Yeah, interesting. Sean, where are you coming from on this?
So, much like Greg, I like a variety of different sources, and there isn't anything that Greg puts up that I haven't liked. If I haven't clicked the actual like, it's only because I was lazy. But there's never been a thing that he hasn't put out that I haven't liked, and here's why I like it. Because I recognize someone who's multifaceted or three-dimensional. Greg listed off a bunch of things that can be appealing to people, such as a sense of humor, some wit, some charm, some style, some panache, all of the things. Purple velvet gloves, which was a bit weird, Greg, but I mean, you just do you. So I think that for me, I need someone who authentically owns themselves, and not as someone who's authentic very early in their journey, because that's less appealing to me. I mean, it's interesting. It's just not appealing. What I prefer nowadays is someone who's been in the game for a while and has learned a bunch of lessons through a bunch of failures, and now they've combined it all into, as Greg said, a bit of a story, and usually an entertaining story. Entertaining not as in juggling balls like a seal, but a barking seal, but just 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 having natural charm based on having lived an interesting life. If you're coming across like an android or a robot as you're relaying information, it is far less appealing than someone who has some personal ticks, some personal oddities, for lack of a better term, that catch my eye, that are human in nature. And so I like a richer avatar rather than a one-dimensional avatar. And again, that's one of the things that I struggle with social media nowadays is uh, uh, trying to influencers who are trying too hard at too young of an age to be something that they might be 20 years from now. And whether I can see through it easily or whether I'm imagining it is neither here nor there. If it's just not for me, it's just not for me. And I know what is for me right now, and that is someone like Greg, who's got experience, who can tell a good story, who has charm and wit, and etc. So I'm quite selective in what I really like on the internet, but I'm much more broad-minded in trying to absorb the internet. And by absorb, I mean like not get to the end of it, but try to understand it more fully, which means that I've got to look at things that sometimes make me shrug my shoulders and think, what is even going on here? But I'm trying to understand this medium that we're in. And the only way I feel to understand it is not just to target lock into the comfortable yellow brick road that takes you down the path of the stuff that you love. You've got to you got to like trip into the ditch, the mud at the side of each side of the yellow brick road to realize that there's things out there that you're not really into. And so I think it really takes a lot of exploring, getting out of your echo chamber, listening to people that maybe kind of irritate you a little bit until you get to the bottom of why they irritate you. And is it them or is it you that is the problem? And I'm, using casual terms here. So I think that the internet as a whole right now is exactly what you want it to be. It is exactly what you need it to be, but it's for you to steer the ship and get the results that you should be seeking.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think I'm going to tie this back into the point that I wanted to you made earlier about languages and the fact that the internet is a language in and of itself. And I've been studying French for the last little while, as most of the internet knows now, because I put my little daily check-ins on there every once in a while. And what I've, at least in my mind, what this comes into is like when you first learn a language, it's extremely formal, right? When you don't really know the intricacies, the slang words, the how to bridge words together, how to make it so that you're a natural, fluent speaker. That takes a long time. That takes a development, and it takes a, as you said, Sean, an exploration of the language itself. But when you speak to somebody that English is a second language, they speak very formally, right? And there's lots of sirs and this needs to go here and that needs to go there versus oh yeah, just toss it over there, right? It's less fluid. And I think that when looking at the internet, it's very similar. If you don't take the time to develop what you're actually trying to find or trying to engage, it can almost be really rigid, right? You'll see lots of hard lines, like there's the left and the right, and there's the center, and they're at least in my mind. What do you guys think, Jim? I'm gonna come to you first on this one. What do you think?
Yeah, the this concept of the internet as a language, I'm laughing a little bit. I mean, no disrespect to anybody, myself included. There's enough gray hair here that we didn't grow up with the internet, and learning that language at a young age. There's people out there who literally have never not had an iPad in their hand, and we weren't that. So trying to come into this now from a later perspective and learn this language, yeah, we are learning it formally, and we're stumbling through this new language that we're trying to do, while other people around us are in fact fluent speakers in the internet, and it's not a big deal to them. The that mass amount of content is just part of their life. It always has been. So it's interesting perspective there, just based on age and how you learn that language.
Greg, what are you thinking?
I'm still thinking about what Sean said, and almost kind of in passing this idea that when you see something on the internet that you don't like, that you object to, that for whatever reason rubs you the wrong way, what's the source of the problem? Is it you? And that's because that's an ongoing question all of us should be asking in every experience of our life: is, am I the problem here? Why am I responding in this way to this situation? And I think the internet is this perfect example of irrationality and hyper emotional reactions to relatively simple things, with a really stunning lack of awareness of those things happening, right? And so that's why we see this like really extreme polarization on every topic now, right? It's not just the classic, conservative liberal politics, but it's literally everything from medicine to design, yeah, to weightlifting. Like it's all, everything's got to be binary, black and white, and extreme. And so I think what we have now is people becoming accustomed to having these really extreme, visceral reactions to things, and never stepping back and saying, why do I have this reaction? Like, am I being completely unreasonable right now? Um, or is this actually warranted? And I think we need more of that in our daily lives, not on the internet, just in every interaction we have and every experience we have. And that's been one of the most kind of valuable. I don't know what you would, not quite an epiphany, but something that I've come to realize over the last 10-15 years of my life, as I've gotten so old and wise, that the way you react to things is generally really inappropriate, because you don't understand why you're doing it, and it just has become habit, without any self-examination. And once you learn to step back and recognize why you're responding the way you do, you can completely change those responses, and you're able to get so much more out of life, because you are able to investigate things, as Sean said earlier, that maybe you seem to disagree with, but you're not sure why. Okay, well, you don't necessarily have to explore them to the point that you agree with them, but you should explore them to the point that you understand why you disagree with them, and make sure you actually have good rationale for that. And that, stop me, please, because I'm just really going far afield at this point.
No, I like it. I'm digging
You
it.
you
Sean,
know
what do you think?
better by now, guys. Like, you got to step in at some point and just tell me to shut up.
Nope, not gonna happen. Sean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I dig. I think that last night I was watching, and I've never really watched him before. I think I've seen him maybe once or twice in passing, and just randomly, like happenstance on the internet. But last night I made a concerted effort to start really tracking Rick Rubin, who I knew a little bit about, just a tiny little bit about Rick Rubin, but now I know a lot more. And I'm not going to describe his career because he's a fascinating dude, that's for sure. And one of the reasons that I was interested in him is because someone had said to me months and months and months ago on the collective that hey, you sound just like Rick Rubin. I was like, okay, who's he? But last night I took the opportunity to try to figure out who he is, and by try to figure out who he is, what does that even mean? That means me sitting down, carefully paying attention to who he represents himself as, and then try to listen to what he has to say and understand him not at a vocabulary level, but try to understand him at a vibe level. Like try to understand what he's about at a vibe level. And like there was entire paragraphs of him talking in the various videos that I watched last night that I just didn't hear because I didn't need to hear them because I was checking in on his vibe. And so he's a vibe dude. And that's, I guess maybe that's why someone said I have some similarity to him, because that's kind of how I live my life now. Is I live on vibe. And one thing that I really did appreciate from everything that I listened or learned from him last night was he's a guy who's kind of not given up to the process, but has entered open mindedly into the process, his process of pursuing the things that interest him and being less concerned about how society evaluates what he's doing and just him simply doing and putting it out there and seeing how it lands and being less concerned about how it lands, being prepped to start doing the next landing the next day. And so he's a guy who's really in a creative process with less judgment on himself and more fascination with allowing what's all inside of us to appear. He's a really interesting dude who spent a lot of time thinking about how to talk to himself. And then through that process, he's learning how to speak to others. But it's an unconventional way that he speaks. It's a really thoughtful, really deep, really at his core. He allows his, you can, I could anyway. I could feel his energy that he was putting out. He was making an effort to communicate on a different level that I feel is missing on the internet from the flash in the pan influencers that pop up for a month and then disappear for the rest of their lives because they've made their $112 and they feel validated. And so Ruben is in the game for the rest of his life, allowing his inner soul to speak out. And I think that to me is the delta between what I see as trying too hard influencers versus someone who's comfortable in their skin, just trying to put it out there, put out whatever is inside of him out there for others to enjoy and to learn and to be better for it. So I think that there's greatness out there on the internet. I'm not claiming that Rick Rubin is great. I'm saying that there's greatness out there in comparison to the suck, to the goofs, to the jackasses that are doing it wrong. So it's about us. It's my responsibility, our responsibility to find not just what feels right to us, but what feels right plus that extra 5%. I wouldn't have been listening to that dude last night if I hadn't have, if something had have been bugging me for the last few months about who the hell is this guy and what's he all about. But I'm glad that the irritation led me down the Sherlock Holmes path of trying to figure out a little bit more about that guy. I'm richer for it. And I wish everyone else would just do the same thing. And maybe the challenge is this, that whoever whoever you think you are to the social media world, whoever you think you're representing out there, I think there's people out there that see us in a different light. And the moment that someone says, you talk like Frank Sinatra, Greg Everett, Well, if Greg doesn't know who Frank Sinatra is, maybe the next step should be, what does that mean to that person, or how are they aligning me with that individual? Is it because of his good looks? Maybe not. But maybe it's a characteristic in that person that you're not aware of, that you can't see yourself, that blind spot. And so maybe as a social media avatar challenge, you could go out there and see who you are to the rest of the world through the descriptor of a big name, we'll call it, and maybe clearly understand what you're striving for. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm tracking. I have an interesting thought, but before I get into that, I want to ask Jim and then Greg. Jim, what do you think on that?
Yeah, Sean, you said something interesting there. Is he's stumbled through? I got to look Rick Rubin up. It sounds interesting, but he's learned how to speak to people. Just it popped into my head there that we probably all had a more common understanding, or there was more common sense, or not common sense, but common language before the internet, and now we have multiple different avenues from which we learn. And I'm not entirely sure that there's as much common ground anymore. So maybe we are coming at it from our own individual perspective, and it's causing that lack of awareness of how we are understanding each other. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but we have, you know, we have access to all of the world's information now that we didn't before, when we were getting things back to that conversation about that singular point of information, and now we have all of the information from a bring it back to social media here. It did remind me of something I saw on my feed the other day, and it was a simple meme, and it says, "Do y'all remember before the internet that people thought the cause of stupidity was the lack of access to information?" Yeah, it wasn't that. So I'm not sure how, but you keyed in that is learning how to speak to people again when you thought they were coming from the same place you were, but they're no longer doing that because there is so much information, and they may have had a completely different perspective ingrained in them than you did.
Indeed, I like that. Greg, what are you thinking?
I'm trying to get organized here because now my head's spinning. First of all, Jim, what you just said, that meme, that's the all-time greatest internet meme. And it doesn't get any more accurate than that. But regarding Sean, I don't even know where I want to start here. Let me back up. Regarding having this common language, and it relates to the authenticity of the person, and this idea too that Sean, you were talking about. But you go back to, you guys familiar with the language Esperanto, right? It was this idea, World War One, where we were going to have this League of Nations, and we were going to create this single language that was spoken across the entire world, and that would be this unifying thing that brought everybody together, and we wouldn't have any more wars, any more problems. Great idea. But you look at something like that, in reducing, the 7-8 billion people of the world to a single language that has not evolved over generations and hundreds and thousands of years to really represent these specific people's way of thinking, feeling, interacting with each other. You can never replicate that with this artificial language that a couple professors in a classroom are going to throw together over the course of a year to save the world, right? And so I think, to me, that parallels this idea of how so many of us are not forced necessarily, but compelled and pressured to find this common language in order to communicate with people for the sake of, say, running a business, right? I have to sell what I do to some extent so I can make money and pay my mortgage and, feed myself and my family and my animals and all this stuff. In order to do that, I have to have some degree of common language with a massive number of people, despite the fact that the way I speak to them is not necessarily the way I would speak in a one-on-one conversation with somebody I knew, or how I speak to myself, like Sean was saying. And therefore, it cannot be 100% authentically myself, because I have, the way I'm speaking is a means to an end that I have to achieve. And so I guess my point is that's the ongoing dilemma is how do we behave as authentically as possible? How do we allow ourselves to be who we truly are so that we are content and fulfilled and able to achieve these things like the Sean Taylor, Rick Rubin level vibe check, um, while still finding that balance with the necessity to communicate with other people who may not understand that type of communication or that particular wavelength or however you want to look at it. And can we do those things simultaneously? Can we do that without preventing ourselves from being ourselves, right? And I think it is possible, but it is definitely a tricky balancing act. And I don't know where I was going with that, so hopefully that makes sense to everybody.
Again, I'm tracking. I'm feeling this. This is great. This goes
Okay,
right. This
I'm
goes.
glad. I'm glad at least one of us is.
This goes into kind of what I was thinking a little bit earlier too, was the fact that you know we've kind of dove into this realm of languages, and I really like it because it's fascinating. But to Sean's point earlier about Rick Rubin, I was listening to a podcast he was on. I think it was the Rich Roll podcast, and he was talking about delivering art to the world, and the fact that by the time he delivers art to the world, it's already gone through all the critical analysis it needs to. And so other people's opinions of that art don't matter because he has criticized it to such a high degree that by the time he feels comfortable letting other people see it, it's already good. It doesn't matter what other people think. He thinks it's good, therefore, good to go. And the reason I bring this up is the fact that I think he especially, he's learned how to use his own language effectively to communicate with the world. And I think that uh, a lot of people in North America especially, we never actually learn our own language. We learn English right off the bat, or we learn the language of our parents right off the bat, but we never learn our language. It doesn't, and because we never take the time to do it, to actually stop and learn, how do I learn? How do I speak? How do I engage people? What is the best way for me to uh, sell something to somebody else? Because the way you sell something, Greg, is going to be very different than the way I sell something. Even though we could use the same techniques, they'll be slightly different. And so I think that at the root of this is that we are not taking the time to understand how we use our own language with the rest of the world. And I think that's where we're all going with this. Am I on the ball here, Sean? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm tracking for sure. I think that you're generally in the ballpark, and just as Greg is, just as Jim is, just as I am, we're all in the same ballpark, trying to maybe not make conclusions, but bounce ideas off each other at the very least. I think that communicating like a Rick Rubin, at one point he didn't know how to do that, but I think that the process where he learned how to do it is something that's available to all of us. I don't think that he's that unique of an individual that he's the only one who can do what he does. I think anyone can do it, but it's exposing yourself to a lifestyle like he exposed himself to, which means that over a period of time, bit by bit, level by level, he engaged more and more accomplished people until he was, shoulder to shoulder with Beyonce or shoulder to shoulder with whoever. The with Johnny Cash, I mean, giving advice to Johnny Cash how Rick Rubin was going to record his next Johnny Cash album. And so, I mean, he's talked to some really interesting people. He's absorbed a lot of interesting ideas. He's listened to a bunch of ways to communicate. And then he's cobbled it all together either through a concerted effort or a focused effort to try and do it better, or he's just let it happen. He's just absorbed the universe and he's putting the universe back out. Depends on how Rick Rubin you want to get on this scenario. And so I dig the fact that he's learned to communicate, but it was not something that just was happenstance. His path forward created his path forward. His success was created by his successes. He lined himself up in a way that he got to speak or listen to people who are more and more interesting than he is. And at some point, he disappeared in the process. He became part of the process, as I understand it anyway, listening to what he's trying to put across. It's what I try to do that I think has some level of success to it, is when you're in the process but not the process, if that means anything to anyone out there. But it's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to authentically exist within the process without overly interfering with it. Just being in your trajectory without screwing up your trajectory by putting all of your thoughtless ideas into the process or overthought ideas into the process. I think it comes down to this for all of us, no matter what phase of our life we're in. Just stop and try to vibe on what the right vibe is for you today, this month, this phase of your life. Because the moment that you move beyond your proper vibe, your proper frequency, if you're trying too hard, it's easy to see. If you're being too lazy, it's easy to see. I can see when someone's at their right vibe, when they're putting out the right workload capacity, when they're doing the right thing. It's easy to see. We all see it on the regular. We just don't talk about it. We just let the incongruity or the dissonance of it occur, and not make mention of it to someone else, or not make mention of it to ourselves. There's a right vibe in every moment, and I think that's what we should be seeking.
I like that. Jim, what are you thinking?
I would agree with that. What I was thinking about while Sean was talking there is that there's some very distinct vibes out there with respect to social media. I think we've kind of gotten sucked into the first to market vibe. Sean, I've rewatched things you've said there, and there's no offense, but you're never going to be a 3 second social media influencer. You say things that I need to go back and listen to because they're intelligent and in long form. So, there's that vibe. I like that vibe. I don't get my information or my my world news in 3 second clips. So there's a competing interest between the first to market vibe and then the long form, let's work this thing out vibe. And this is the vibe that we have in this group here, is we're sitting here stumbling through trying to work it out. But good luck chance trying to fit that into a 12-second post. It's not going to work, right? So yeah, it's just two different vibes, and I think time is the thing that just separates those. Is, do you want short entertaining, or do you want to actually sit down and work through the problem, and which vibe is for you? So
That's a good point. Greg, what are you thinking?
Yeah, to kind of go back and touch on what Sean was saying with the process and authenticity is, I think the primary reason it is so difficult for people to engage in this process is because if you look at the process end to end, right, the beginning, you are safe, comfortable. You may not be authentic by any stretch of the imagination. You are putting on an act. You are doing what you need to do to kind of get what you need from the world. On the far end, you have reached, Rick Rubin enlightenment, fully vibe dependent. You're not, you are the process, you are the path, right? You're not walking the path, you are the path. But in between those 2 points, you are out there over the canyon without a net, right? And you are exposing yourself, you're becoming very vulnerable because you are in that process of behaving, speaking more authentically, um, and exposing that side of yourself to people, to judgment, to criticism, to reaction, without having yet reached that fully enlightened stage. Whereas Rick Rubin says, well, by the time it gets to anybody, I've already decided it's good, and therefore their opinions do not matter. I don't think there are many of us who can say, no matter how far along that path we are, that other people's thoughts about who we are and what we do not matter at all. I mean, that's literally Buddha level, right? That's the kind of like the ultimate goal. You reach that right before you die, right? You're like, I made it. And then it's over. You move on to the next stage. So to get there while you still have years of life left is an extremely unusual thing. And that means that for the vast majority of that life, of that process, you are going to be in that vulnerable position where you have to consciously remember, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is why I'm trying to achieve it. And those things are why I need to allow these people's opinions about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it to roll off my back, rather than to disrupt that trajectory, as Sean put it, or me muddle that trajectory by interfering in ways that will prevent it from actually going in the direction it needs to go to achieve that final amazing end that we all assume we will get to.
I'm really digging this. This is awesome, and it brought up this interesting thought about the stank, and I'm going to explain this in a second. Is that the uh, when you're single and you're really looking to link up with someone, there's like a stank, right? It's obvious that you're looking, and it's almost off-putting for the opposite sex that you are you're just needy, right? And you're like, oh well, and you're agreeable and totally into whatever it is rather than being yourself. So you're putting you're putting up a front to you know throw off the fact that you have no idea what you're doing. And I think that that's kind of what we're talking about here, is that throughout your life you're going to continually try to like, okay, I'm ready, let's go do this thing, this is going to be awesome, and just you're going to be pretending for the first little while until you realize like, oh okay, I don't need to pretend anymore. Like this happened in my first day of jiu-jitsu. You go in there thinking, oh yeah, I got this. Yeah, I'm a pretty big dude. I kind of know what I'm doing. And then you get stomped, right? And then you go,
Yeah,
oh,
you get stomped by a 110-pound blue belt.
exactly, right? And it's humbling, and you can either accept that and go, okay, I need to remove the facade and just engage in this naturally and see what happens. Or you put the ego back, the facade back up, and go, no, you know what? That's garbage. It was a bad day. I wasn't feeling it, and then you never touch it again, right? And you fall back into that stank, that neediness, that I can't think of the proper word for it right now, but it is, you're totally inauthentic to what is happening in the moment. You may think you have a vision of yourself, but you're not actually who you are. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is breaking through that wall of the ego, of the requirement for other people's approval, for the fact that oh well, I believe this is the way it should happen, without taking the time to realize that the world is actually over here, and what you think is actually supposed to happen is not realistic, or it's not the truth as per what the world is showing you. Any thoughts on that, Jim? What do you think?
I first want to acknowledge that the last couple shows here, you've grabbed something and pulled it apart very intelligently. One is stank. I didn't think that was going to come up. Last time was velocity and raptor. I'm loving how you're picking some things apart. So yeah, I agree. There's definitely the stank of trying too hard. But there's also, I'm not sure how to describe that. There's like a good stank, as you are trying. This group here got a lot of really cool guests that come on here, and we're trying. But it's not an arrogant trying. It's not a cocky, I know everything about the world stank. It's a it's a good, professional, humble stank, which I've said stank too many times, so I'll pass the mic.
Love it. Greg, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's definitely to pick up on the new word, kind of a sense of desperation versus a sense of eagerness or enthusiasm, right? Where you are extremely motivated to learn and get better and do whatever, rather than desperate to prove to other people that you are such and such, right? And I think that's the authenticity difference is do you want to be good, or do you want to look good? Do you want to be this thing, or do you want people to believe you are this thing? And they're completely different states of being, and they take completely different avenues to achieve them. And I think that's what you guys sniff out. You know, when you see someone who on paper you can see two very similar people, but immediately you kind of gravitate towards the one who is actually authentically that person and is going after those things for the right reasons in the right way, versus, hey, look what I am, look what I've done, look at my belts and, you know, my medals, or, you know, whatever the case is, whatever they're chasing, just to show them to you and get that approval. And that's the interesting thing, though, is because the ultimate end to this is you never actually know about the true authentic people, because they're not showing you who they are, right? And I was actually thinking about this morning on my way home from the hardware store for some reason. Is, you know, in my experience, not only is there always someone out there who's better than you, they also are way less interested in you knowing about it.
I like that. I'm going to make that a clip, just so you know. That's your 15-second clip. It's right there.
Perfect. I hope
Sean,
I said it right then.
100%. Sean, you got thoughts on this?
I do. I think that just to build off of what Greg just said, and it's an interesting little, it's not a trick and it's not a ambush, but it is an interesting little thing that can occur in a person's life where they've done something for a long, long time and become really good at it and never talked about it. And then 21 years later, or whatever the case is, they finally put up a photo on the internet for the first time ever, where they're like the king of the world, or whatever that means, where they've just done something so epic, but they've never talked about it before. No one knew about it. You know, they've never seen a photo of your kitchen, but the very first photo that they see in your kitchen is where you're a French seal chef, or whatever the case is, where you're just freaking cracking it out of the park. That really makes people sit up and pay attention. Because in front of that image, there wasn't the drudgery of watching someone learn how to lick a spoon or stir the recipe or whatever the case is. It went from flash to bang in a split second. And that huge delta between, I didn't know you were a mega chef, that kind of leaves a mark. At least it does in my mind. And so, what doesn't leave a mark in my mind, actually, that's wrong. What does leave a mark in my mind is when day after day, someone keeps showing images of them licking a spoon. After about a year of them licking the spoon every single day, I'm out, because there's no delta there. There's nothing to make me sit up and pay attention. And so, I think that an interesting social phenomenon for some of um, the more gray hairs out there is, if you've never put up a photo of you like king of the hill moment, like throw up a photo, let everyone tune into the fact that at one point in your life you did something that nobody is aware of, and make them sit up and pay attention, not to be impressed by your performance, but just to add a little bit more richness to who you are as a person, to demonstrate that nobody has to be one dimensional. Now, as I'm speaking about one dimensional, I'm going to have to talk about a one dimensional process that helps you become more three dimensional. And that is, I'm going to use Greg as the example. At one point in his young life, Greg decided that he was going to start moving weights around on day one, whenever that was. And Greg didn't know what he was doing. Now he knows a lot. And so, through his journey of learning everything that Greg's learned, he's learned the process for Greg that he can now apply to anything else in his life. And the reason that he's going to be successful at anything in his life is because he's gone deep into the process. Where I see a lot of problems is someone chooses a process, we'll call it frisbee throwing, and they stay in it for a week and then they bounce. As a dabbler, you will never see the successes in life that you deserve, because you've never learned your process deep enough to apply it throughout the rest of your life. You could be the king of the hill in so many things, if that's what interests you, but you'll never be the king of the hill in anything until you learn how to be the king of the hill in one thing well enough that you can apply throughout the rest of your life.
Interesting. Jim, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm getting more and more confused as we go along. There's like this continued dichotomy, I guess, if you will. Because Sean, you just said, I like the flash to bang, and I know there's no build up to that. There is something to be said though too, where you've got influencers that are, I'm starting from nothing, and I'm going to show you my journey, and it is an authentic kind of thing where they're being humble enough to put that out there that, hey, I can do it, you can do it. Um, I guess analogy would be like if I'm walking into a jiu-jitsu gym, I'm not going to pick out the black belt and go teach me. I'm going to find somebody at the blue level and say, hey, let's chip away at this, because I'm not at that black level. I'm not at the world-class chef level. So I maybe want to see somebody along the way at my level. So I'm not sure how to describe this. We're talking about social media and the things that are drawing us to it, and it's infinite. I don't even know where your individual draw is, but there is something for everybody, and that just cued in there is, um, maybe it's slash to bang, and maybe it's the process that is your vibe.
Greg, what do you think on this?
I'll trim it down. So, listening to what Sean says, I think of the expression, learn everything about something and learn something about everything, right? And that speaks to this idea that learning the process, and not just learning the process, but experiencing the process, going through the process, is you are learning how to learn other things, right? And that's why that active intent to learn is so important, because you're not just learning that one thing you are learning the process of learning. And that is how you get someone who has, like Sean says, reached that king of the hill level in multiple areas that are often seemingly unrelated. And so I do think that, I don't know that it always has to be a totally conscious process from the start, but certainly after the fact, or as you get through the process, you do need to be able to kind of step back and take a look at kind of the inner workings of all those moving parts, and how am I doing what I'm doing, what is effective, what is not effective, so that you can then apply that process to other pursuits. And I think some of that too becomes instinctual, because you are learning it on an unconscious level. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have any clean way to conclude all that, so
I think
we'll
I
just
think we're
end
all
with
going to struggle
dead
here.
air.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's
Okay.
good, man. I got it. The the key, I think, is we all really like to see. I know for me, and I don't want to speak for y'all, but we really like to see the the level of skill, the level of um, I'm trying to think of the word for it now, but we like to see the extent of someone's skill. Someone who is fantastic. They put in all the work. They've done the process. They are just friggin' phenomenal. We like to see that because you get to actually envision what it would be like to go through that process. I'm thinking of a guy named Omri Guichon. I don't know if you guys know who that guy is. He's a chocolatier, and he makes hyper realistic things. And I'll see if I can pull up a video of him real quick here. But the the key point of this is the fact that he is the extent of chocolate, right? The extent of chocolate. Here we go. I'll pull it up for you guys, and you can see it. Boom. So this is the kind of stuff he makes: hyper realistic chocolate pieces, and he shows the video of how these things are made. And what I love about this is that anybody can do this, technically, right? Supposedly anybody could do this, but everything he shows in here takes a extreme level of skill and many years of practice. And the fact that he just made a chocolate uh, box that is hyper realistic with tape and all kinds of stuff. Um, the beautiful things about this is that he's just showing the work, all of the effort, all the process. He has learned how to do each one of these steps to a extremely high level. Now that's not impossible for any of us. So I love watching this stuff, but I think this is what we're talking about, is the fact that We all like to see this, but would you like to see him go to culinary school? Would you like to see him all the trial and all the process and all the failures and all the uh, extra stuff? I don't know if many people would like to sit and watch through all that process. They just want to see the final product. So, what do you guys think on that? At least, am I in the right ballpark here, Sean? What are you thinking?
I think that what I just saw is a guy who did what Greg did just a few minutes ago. And that is, Greg is so comfortable with who he is. Now, I'm not saying he's the most comfortable individual in the world. That's not my point. I'm just saying that he's so comfortable with who he is that when he started delivering his thoughts and came to a natural conclusion, and there was a little bit of dead air there, he's comfortable enough to kind of have a little bit of a laugh with it. Like, he's chillaxed. He's not panicking. He's not scared of the silence. He's just in the moment and not like joking, but he's in the moment and relaxed in the moment. As I was watching that chocolate video, it could have been Greg, except with steel. So that chef was in there doing his thing. And as you watch him do his thing, like part of his thing is performance, his smile, the way he's looking at the camera or not looking at the camera. I'm not going to say it's contrived, though it is created. It would be contrived if he was representing something that he's not. If there was a whiff of that guy being super fake with his smile, I'd end the video. But he was right on the edge of performance versus authenticity. And I was okay with that. And here's why I was okay with it, because he was performing at such a high level and had so many things going on. Again, if you watch that video, it's not just how his hair looks, it's not just how his structure is, it's not how he does things. It's the entire polished presentation that requires lighting and angles and direction and great camera work and all of the stuff. There's a lot of things going on in that video, but at the core of it, the dude is authentic because he's been in the game a long time. He feels like he owns the moment. Of course, he owns the moment. He's owned the moment 1,000 moments before that moment. And so I love watching someone who's achieved a level, whether they're the best in the world or not. If you're the 1,000th best in the world, to me, that's a level that demonstrates you've been in the game and can own your game. I love watching people who are comfortable and confident and capable enough in the moment that they can leave that sentence to trail off and be comfortable with 2 or 3 or 4 seconds of silence and not panic, just like Greg didn't. And so a video like that doesn't make me want to start baking. A video like that makes me want to try harder, to be cooler with the things that I do and more authentic. Not be cool for the internet, but be cooler for me. Just understand that there's levels that I need to aspire to perform at for Sean to be happy. And I'm not saying I'm so critical that I'll never be happy. I'm just saying that the way I'm wired, I like to know that there's something out there to chase, and it's cool. It's a cool thing to chase, not a contrived final boss moment where I'm half an inch away from ending the video game and I know that the big boss sucks. Like, I want to fight the big boss that is freaking hardcore difficult to beat, rather than, God, the end of this video game is contrived. It's how to win this game is inauthenticity. So I love seeing a guy like that. It gives me hope that the game never ends.
Yeah, I've played games like that where the end is just like, oh man, like it's such a letdown. Hours and hours and hours of work and then nothing. And you're like, lame. Jim, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's funny. I've come across that guy. I think it was, I don't know, a show that he did back in 2014 where he was a judge on that show, and then start getting into that where you know, again, you see that flash to bang kind of guy, but he's also got a bunch of different levels of, you know, him doing that, but also working with people who are I don't want to say train wrecks because they were on a TV show, but they were less than him, and he worked through the competition phase of how to get people through that. And now some of those people have their own social media that showed that journey, but also now show them at the level that he's at, or slightly below. So that's interesting. He's done a lot. So he's kind of run that gamut from here's me as the expert to here's me as the coach to I'm helping somebody else that's starting from the ground up, also um, show their journey through getting to that point.
Absolutely. Greg, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think seeing someone like that who has that level of skill, regardless of your interest in the skill itself. Like I could not be less interested in learning how to make stuff with chocolate. Uh, but at the same time, I instantly recognize the extreme level of his ability, and respect the fact that that's not something you learn in 6 months. That's a lifetime of very dedicated work. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we collectively like seeing experts, is because we recognize the the fact that they have had to dedicate so much time and energy, and really invest in this process to get there, to the point that it looks effortless. And so I think we find inspiration in that. Ideally, not discouragement, because we are not at that level, although that's definitely a possibility. But I think then you can apply that inspiration to any pursuit, no matter how unrelated it is to that original kind of skill that you witnessed.
And you bring up a fantastic point on the discouragement thing, and I think I wanted to touch on this, was the fact that on my social media feed, I have a lot of people that are experts, and I see a lot of really cool stuff from shooters, guitar players, chocolatiers, yourself, Greg, on Olympic lifting, jujitsu, all kinds of stuff. People who are experts in the field, or subject matter experts, or SMEs, or whatever, and they're doing outstanding stuff. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, that type of content I would have used this particular phrase, which is, that is friggin' cool. I could never do that. And just that one phrase has completely, at that time, all it did was degrade myself to a point that I wasn't capable of doing things. Whereas now, in the last couple of years, since we started the collective, and I've really put the effort in, put the work in, I see these things now as you said, a inspirational moment. Like, man, if that guy can do it, okay, I know what I can do, and I can start diving into what I'm truly meant to do. But there are a lot of people out there that see that and get discouraged. They look at the collective and they say, man, Sean, special forces, dude, I would never be that guy. Would you, though? If you really put the time in, put the effort in, would you be that? Could you be a world champion mountain biker? Could you be an Olympic lifting coach? Could you be, high-level RCMP? Like, we're capable of many things. But I think that for a lot of people out there, they see these things as discouraging moments rather than encouraging moments. And I'm wondering, how do we bridge that gap? How do we get people that are seeing it in a discouraging light to shift their glance and make it an encouraging light, to make them work harder, better, faster, all that good stuff? Jim, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I knew you were going to come to me first. I, I think it's the shotgun method. I'm stumbling to find a singular answer to this, because it's such a personal thing, and how you bring people into that, and make them move into the realm where they want to better themselves, or who they want to emulate, or how much better they want to get. It's a strange realm, especially in social media, on who you identify with and who you pick up. I'm thinking about the say the social media podcasting scene. I mean, you said it yourself, like your episode number 1 was very different than this episode here. You guys have gotten better. You've shown humility. You've got what, some episodes, over 300 episodes here now, where there has been a progression. So anybody looking to get better at podcasting or go on a podcast, here's a perfect inspiration. But that's not for everyone. There's people that want to see different things from a podcasting scene if they wanted to get better at that. So I'm not even sure I have a good answer there, other than that shotgun method, whether there is something for everyone. And um, you branched off into the gold mine and the main show and different types of how you're putting this show out there. So it's something is going to click with somebody, and that method is probably the way you've got to go if you want your craft to be seen by the most possible number of individuals for that benefit.
Absolutely. Greg, thoughts?
Yeah, I look at this from two different directions, right? Is you asked, what can we do to kind of bridge that gap and get people going from feeling discouraged to being inspired or encouraged by seeing these experts or whatever. And I think that to some degree, the experts can provide help, guidance, right? So that the chocolatier guy, he can make some how-to videos, step one kind of stuff. How do you melt chocolate, right? How do you even get this composition to then work with and create a box and whatever? Just like I break down Olympic lifts, and I have videos that are extremely basic to more complex and whatever. So that's the one side is content creators, educators can provide the material, but the consumers have to take the initiative, right? Is they have to choose to pursue that education. And so the real question to me is, what makes somebody make that decision, right? So what is it so Chance, this is the question for you really, is what made you go from that's cool, I could never do that, to that's cool, I'm going to find out how to do that? Like there's, in my experience, there is not necessarily a single moment, but there is an experience or an interaction with somebody else that flips that switch. And it may not be extreme, right? You don't go from one end to the other, but you cross that threshold into the I can't do this, to the this is, I see now what is possible, and I believe that I have the ability to at least pursue this and try. And so I think, as Jim said, that's very individual, and it may be a mentor, it may be a parent, maybe a coach, whatever, or it may be you read an article on someone's social media thing, and it, for whatever reason, the language clicked in your head, and that was what made you take that moment and say, I need to stop how I'm thinking, or change the way I'm thinking, and start recognizing these kind of self-defeatist mental processes, and move towards this more kind of self-enabling and confidence sort of approach toward life generally.
Yeah. To answer your question, I don't know if there was any one particular thing. It was a multitude of things, but I know, especially podcasting as a whole, um, I saw a gap. There was the stuff that I was dealing with, the stuff that my friends were dealing with, all of the things that we were struggling with. I was looking for answers. I was going around like, well, why are so many veterans struggling? And I'd look around, and there weren't any answers. Nobody had any thoughts on it. Nobody had any discussions on it. There was nothing out there that I saw. So I started talking to other people. And then as soon as I started talking to other people, they had their own thoughts on it. They had their own ideas on it. And then I kept waiting for this. I've said this story many times. I was waiting for this Paragon, this tier 1 assaulter dude, kind of like this guy up in the top corner here, that was going to come down off of the hill and be like, all right, boys, this is how we're going to solve the problem. Follow me. And we'd all just be like, cool, man. And off we'd go. But the longer I waited, no one showed up. There was no one around. No one was doing that. And I was like, okay, well, I can't just sit here and let the situation deteriorate. I'm going to do something. I'm just going to start. And that's how it began, was just, I'm going to do it until someone better comes along. And nope, nobody has come along. So it's just been me kind of talking into the mic for a while. But the change in mindset came especially, I'd say 5 or 6 months into the collective. So this is just recently, within the last 7-8 months. It came after a couple of episodes with Sean barking at me a couple times to get my stuff in order, but really it came down to the fact that we did a show, and I felt at the end of it, I was like, man, that was a killer. Like, that was a good show, great conversation, everything worked out well. And then afterwards, the reception was equal to what I thought. So I was like, okay, I thought we did really well. Everyone else said we did really well. Okay, that was a really good show. And then I went back to see one of my first episodes, and I was like, ooh, wow. You can see the big difference. And then I realized in that moment how much I had changed, and how much how physically I hadn't changed, but mentally I had changed. And that's all it was just the decision factors, and the fact that I just kept going. And I kept working on it. I kept trying to get better, and I wanted to have better lighting, and I wanted to have better audio, and I wanted to have better guests, and I wanted to have better, all of the stuff that makes a good podcast. And I had removed my requirement for other people's input. I just wanted to put together a good show. It wasn't that I wanted you guys to have think it was a good show. I just wanted to have a good show, and I developed it from there, so on and so forth. Sean, what do you think? Since you've been watching me do this for a while, what do you think?
I think that when it comes down to subject matter experts, or it comes down to someone who's doing it well or right, or leading the charge, as it were, that's just a learned process. And I think that, as I was trying to make the point earlier, uh, via Greg stepped into the trajectory of powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting and all of the lifting. And year after year after year, he developed the rest of his life through a process called steel. And he became good at steel, but he became good at life because of steel, because of the process. And once you learn the process, you can apply the process to all processes in your life. And so, like podcasting, at some point, Chance, you'd said to yourself, well, that looks really cool, but I can't do that. Well, at some point in my military career, I used to think that as well when I was young. And then further into my military career, I started to think, if that dude can do it, I can do it. And then once I started doing it, I started thinking, and I can do it better. Not because I believed I could do it better, it's because I started doing it better. Not to prove him wrong or prove anyone wrong, but to prove to myself that there's another way to do this better. Better for me. And if the result kicks out a better result for everyone else around me, then double down good. But as part of my solo journey, my solo learning process, I've got to figure out ways that Sean does things better. And if other people see that there's a better way to do it as well, then bonus. But I have to demonstrate to me through action, through results, outcomes, that the workload capacity that I put into it produces a workload result. Because I can talk all day long about how to do things right, but if I'm not producing any right results, then it's just talk. So my process at some point in my military career was, I started to believe, and now I know it to be true, that anything that I set my mind to, I can do, as long as I make it important enough and I have the timeline to do it. And so just yesterday, Chance, I'd finished watching it just recently dropped, just yesterday, I believe it was, the podcast with Dean Stott, Action Man Stott. And something that Dean had said kind of made me think, yeah, Dean is so right. And that's, he was taught as I was taught, and I don't think you have to be in tier 1 to be taught this, but it just lines up nicely that way. I was taught that if it needs to be done, we'll find a way to make it happen. And so in the podcast, I said that if the fate of the world rested on the fact that I had to, over the next 10 years, become an astronaut to save the planet, well, freaking get out of the way. I'll be a 70-year-old astronaut. It doesn't mean that I'd be able to like save the planet. It just means that for the next 10 years, everything that I do will be oriented to becoming an astronaut to save the planet. And so why would I like start trying to be a 70-year-old astronaut? Because it's freaking important enough. It's the freaking planet. I got to save it. It's time to get to work. But we can't do it for ourselves when it's not about saving the planet. You know what I'm saying? We look at something and we know that it needs to be done. Whether we believe we can do it or not is immaterial. It just needs to be done. Has to be done. And you'll go do it to save the planet, but you won't do it to save yourself. And which one is more important, save yourself or save the planet? If you can't save yourself, then the planet doesn't exist. So you got to get to work on your prioritization of why you're doing a thing. And it all starts with, I believe I can. It's important enough that I do. Not just get out of your own way and start doing.
I like that. Jim, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have this feeling Sean's going to be making chocolate in space very shortly. Keep an eye on his social media.
I have made chocolate. I mean, sorry, Jim, to cut you off, but it kind of ties into the conversation of being curious about life or not. Like, I don't believe I'm a chocolate maker, but just a few years ago, I was in Seattle at the largest chocolate maker show in North America, and I was learning how to temper chocolate. I was doing things with chocolate for a couple of years that I never talk about. It's a little side project that I had. It's not that interesting, but I had to learn how to make chocolate. And it's a fascinating process. I mean, if you screw up your timing or temperature by 1 degree or by 1 minute on tempering chocolate, forget about it. Now you've got ugly chocolate. It's still edible, but the crystals within the chocolate just won't form up in a cohesive pattern so that you're getting silky smooth, beautiful artisanal chocolate. By not paying attention, it's still chocolate. It's just not world-class chocolate. And that is like life, man. That is the process. If you want to get good at something, you've got to treat it like it's important. You've got to treat it like it's as important as saving the planet sometimes. Making chocolate is saving the planet in a weird way. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And so I don't know what's around the corner for me next year. Making chocolate, I don't know. I've already done it. Growing flowers, I'm not opposed to it as long as I learn something about myself in the moment and can somehow make life better for those around me.
Sean's going to be making he's going to be making chocolate flowers in 0G in space in 10 years, 100%. Jim, what were you going to jump into?
The way you guys are describing this is very interesting. It's like a series of I want to say epiphanies, but it's not quite like epiphanies. They're just like smaller level epiphanies, but at some point you realize something and it's like, oh, it's got to be me, or I have now made the decision in my mind. I'm going to go do that. And to bring it back to the social media conversation, it's like, where did that inspiration come from? We started off talking about social media in a very negative way, but there's also these positive aspects of like, if you can just give somebody that nugget to go, hey, wait a minute, I can do that, or that should be me. At some point, you're going to put in enough effort and have these little epiphanies along the way. You're going to look around and you're going to be, well, I guess I'm the one with the most knowledge now. I put in the effort, and it'll just happen kind of overnight. Like Sean, or Chance, you said, like at some point you just realized I'm doing it. I went back and looked at my previous work, and I'm at a level that's pretty cool, and it happened overnight. I've had the similar experiences, I guess, where I'm just looking around and going, well, somebody's got to do this. I guess it's going to be me. And then before you know it, 20 years has passed, and I'm doing something, and I'm leading something. So it's back to that social media, just finding what it is you need to latch onto, and see where that grain of sand takes you.
Yeah, I like that. Greg, thoughts on this?
No one's coming to save us. That's what it all boils down to, right? And I think when all of us have had that experience clearly, where you recognized if this needs to be done, I need to do it, right? What did Hannibal say? I will find a way or make one. And that's been like the funnest elements of my entire life, really, is figuring out how to get things done, right? I get that question. My Instagram is all about weightlifting, of course. Every once in a while, I'll post something about some project I'm working on, and somebody like, how did you learn to do this? I'm like, I just tried, right? And that attitude right there has been, I think, the most important thing for me in my life is if you're willing to try something that you don't yet know how to do, then you know how to do it, right? If you say, well, I don't know how to do this, so I'm not going to try to do it, you can't learn anything, right? At some point, you have to accept being a beginner, knowing nothing, making lots of mistakes, and being willing to do that without being embarrassed. Um, I mean, I would probably be terrible at becoming an astronaut. They stick you in the accelerator thing. I'd pass out at, half a G or something and be like, oh man, what a loser. But, how are you going to know unless you get in there and try? And, after day one, I guess the planet's coming to an end. Sorry, guys, but at least I got out there and gave it a shot.
The world ends with Greg in a centrifuge. That's going to be
My
interesting,
bad.
right? I like it. I want to bring this back to we were talking earlier about learning our own language, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about too right now. Is that you know I learned how to talk to myself eventually through this process, and I learned how to engage with myself in a way that was positive and uplifting and developmental. And I said earlier, I'm learning French, and some of the more difficult things that I have within that language are are like infinitives and the structure of the sentence and the grammar that's being used and why is this here. And at one point I had to call one of my friends who's a francophone, and I was like, why is there a train involved in this person doing something? And it has nothing to do with the train. It's just the fact that the word train is used as in a to go from point A to point B, like you're developing a skill, you're growing, or doing something A to B, and a train is used in the sentence. It's weird. But I really struggled with that until I could make that connection, right? I was just like, why is this here? This makes no sense, because my language of English and French, there was an incongruity there, right? There wasn't a way for me to bridge those 2 points. But the moment I was able to make that connection and go, oh, the train means that you're going somewhere or you're doing something, it gives me the ability to make that connection. And I think social media especially has that ability to give us those connections, to be able to say, Omri Guichon is making these world-class chocolates. Well, I've never made that, but I have made caramel once or twice or 3 times or 4 times. Okay, I have a general idea of how to do that. And if I really wanted to dive into that realm, I have a starting point and I can move forward from there. Do you think that there is maybe a separation for a lot of people out there, that they don't have that starting point, or they don't have that ability to bridge those 2 points because there's no they're looking at it from a point of view of like, I'm way down here and they're at the top of the mountain. I don't see a path. They don't even see the mountain. They just see somebody up in the clouds, if that makes any sense. So I'm wondering, do you think that's the issue out there with people that are getting discouraged when they see these paragons, these experts? Or do you think it is a more personal, just they don't know how to talk to themselves? Sean, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you think?
I think the very simple word that comes to mind is mindset. And you either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And so the fixed mindset is, how do they do that? I can never do that. That's fixed. Growth is, how do they do that? I wonder how long it'll take me to be able to do that as well. Now you're moving. Now you're moving forward. Now you're thinking forward. Now you're seeing the future. Now you're starting to visualize, I wonder, dot, dot, dot. Now you're in the game. I find that most people struggle looking up at, we'll call them the paragons on top of the mountain. They struggle with that idea because they have crazy glued their minds to the base of the mountain. Whereas no one should ever fear the height of the mountain. They should only fear not starting. So to me, irrespective, it could be Mount Everest times 2. And if someone says, hey, Sean, you need to go to the top of the second Mount Everest by the end of today to save the planet, and without oxygen, I'll have my phone in my hand as I'm flying to Nepal trying to figure out how to do that. I won't know how to do it, but I'll be figuring out how to do it. Will I be successful? Highly unlikely, but I'll be in the game of being in the game. And I really do feel that life is mindset. And as simple as I can make it, you're either growth mindset or you're fixed mindset. And if you're fixed mindset for the rest of your life, you know, and I know how your life is going to turn out. It's going to turn out one dimensional. And you'll regret it on your deathbed. Guaranteed. How do I know that? I'm not on my deathbed yet, but I've just heard it too many times. I have heard it too many times. And so if the one option is regret on the deathbed versus I'm going to do something about that now, well, congratulations. You just entered into the adventure of life. That is the key to me. Go adventure. Don't worry about what's around the corner. Walk around the corner. Don't worry about how high the mountain is. Just start walking up it. Along the way, even without hiking poles, you'll figure it out. That's the beauty of not having hiking poles, is you have to figure out the adventure. The hard way, maybe not the easy way, but you'll get it done with the right prioritization, with the right importance. So what does that all mean at the end of the day? Your why. Why are you here? What's the point? Why am I in the game? Why adventure? Why crazy glue myself to the base of the mountain? The why of the world, the why of your life. That's the thing that I think a lot of people could sit down and move the needle on is, why am I here? Now that I know my why, time to get a growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a ton. Of course, this and I hate to do the shameless plug, but my last book covers a lot of exactly what Sean was talking about, and that's idea. Okay, well, you have growth versus fixed mindset, and the way I look at it often is you have people who are spectators and people who are participants. Right? The spectators are those of us who kind of view life as this thing that is happening to them versus this thing that they are doing. Right? And the real question in my mind, again, because how those two people operate is very obvious, as Sean just talked about. But the real question is, how do we become each of those? And it seems to me that it is a process over time, probably starting at a very early age, based on who and what we're exposed to and how. Kind of how our experiences are interpreted based on those things that we've learned from those around us. For example, if you're a little kid and you're curious and you're going out and trying things and you've got parents who are like, no, that's dangerous. No, don't do that. No, that's not okay. You're very quickly going to learn to quit trying things and kind of become a spectator and have this fixed mindset where it's like, these things happen out here. I stay right here in my place safely, comfortably, and I don't worry about it. Whatever happens, that's going to happen. Fine. Um, and then you've got kids who grow up with parents or in whatever circumstances in which they are allowed to kind of explore that curiosity and try things and create things and make mistakes and fall out of trees and break their legs and understand how gravity works and all these different things that allow them to be participants from a young age and learn that through that active participation in life, you develop all these new abilities and you learn all these new things and you build this mind that is more and more curious, but also more and more able to solve problems resourcefully. And so I think I do believe, obviously, that you can change that as an adult. it's just going to be a lot harder. It's just like learning a language. I can learn a language now at age 44, but it would have been a lot easier to start when I was 5, having bilingual parents, for example. And so it's all these things are easy to do, but now as an adult, you have to take those conscious steps, and you have to, as Sean said, make that decision. I am going to get out of this fixed mindset. I'm going to develop a growth mindset, which means that I have to consciously catch myself when I say things like, I can't do this, or I should not do this, or this is risky, and say, well, what am I risking? What am I risking by not doing it, right? Regret and, miserable life, all these things, and then making those decisions consciously versus as a 4-year-old running around in the woods trying stuff. Those are not conscious decisions. I don't know how smart you guys were at age 4, but I wasn't that smart. It's kind of like, ow, this hurts. I should maybe stop doing this. Or maybe I'll try it 10 more times and see if it was really the reason that it hurts. You know how it goes when you're 4. Yeah, again, cut me off anytime here, gentlemen.
100%. I do know what that's like. I've run into many issues where I've done it 6 or 7 times just to be sure.
Yeah.
It was actual the thing, right? It wasn't
this
just
time's going to be different.
This time it's going to be different. No, it never is. Jim, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's just I don't view it as fixed or growth. I think you can cross between any one of those at any given time. I think it's probably easier for those who have a natural growth mindset to be in that mindset or get back to that mindset. And you mentioned there, like when you find out what gravity can do, and you get hurt, you can put yourself in a very static or fixed mindset easily because of that setback. So I would suggest that if you had previously experienced that growth mindset, it's probably more. It's easier to get back to that point. I like to focus on the people who maybe have that naturally fixed mindset, and finding out what it is that is going to ignite that fire and move them out of that fixed mindset. Because once they experience the growth mindset, it might be something that puts them on an entirely new path. So again, back to social media, there's lots of options out there now that wasn't present in the past to maybe pull somebody into that growth mindset. I'd also take them down a very negative route if you get down the wrong rabbit hole.
That is the truth. And this just clicked in my head, and I'm going to test it out on you guys. I'm going to postulate this for you and see what your guys' thoughts are on it. Perhaps the ability is not so much to be in a growth mindset or in a fixed mindset. It's the ability to move between the two. And I'm going to say, Sean, you're a very good example of being both fixed and growth, because you're in a constant kind of state of growth, but you also know your process. And so when you put your 10-year program into effect and you say, okay, I'm going to grow in this area, and you're going to shut down everything else. So like you will be a fixed mindset in this 10 years in order to grow this one skill. And the ability to shift between those two, I think, could be the key to understanding your own language, to who you are as a core human being. You take your why and you go, okay, this is why I want to do these things. Time to grow. Let's grow. But you're going to fix your mindset on that growth rather than on everything else. Because if you're constantly growing in everything, then you're a dabbler, like I used to be, right? I want to grow in that. Ooh, that's neat too. Oh, I'm going to go do that. Oh, I'm going to learn this thing. Oh, I'm going to learn that thing. But you're never actually fixed long enough to really develop that skill set. You're just constantly growing in multiple different directions without any boundaries. What do you guys think on that? Do you think it is a viable thought process to be able to, that the key in that is to be able to switch between the two of them? Greg, I'm going to come back to you. What do you think?
All due respect, I don't know if I would think of it that way, simply because I understand what you're saying in that you are kind of keeping everything static over here so you can pursue this one thing. I don't know that that's a fixed mindset with regard to those things you're static on. That's just kind of a prioritization of time, effort, investment. I do think that there is this idea of knowing your why, your values, what's meaningful to you, and also understanding clearly your present capabilities. And that is how we get, it's not optimism versus pessimism. It is confidence in what you are capable of doing while currently recognizing your limitations. And not limitations as in I cannot do this, but in this moment, this is the extent and the manner in which I am able to pursue this thing. Right. So for example, I want to climb Mount Everest with Sean. Okay. Well, I'm going to be on the phone looking up some stuff too, because I've done rock climbing, I've done all kinds of outdoor stuff, but not an alpinist. And so I know my limitations. I know that I cannot go climb an 8,000 meter peak by myself or with someone else inexperienced, even though I know these basic things. But I also know that I am capable of learning those things when I have enough experience and enough of a base of knowledge and ability to learn those things relatively quickly, to find out how to do them, to then train them, to then be able to do that thing. So I guess my point is, to me calling it kind of a fixed mindset is too negative of a connotation versus just kind of recognizing your limitation in that sense is you only have so much time and energy and focus to commit to any pursuit. And so you can be the dilettante who's, doing a million different things to a very small extent, or you can set those other things aside temporarily, even if it's long term, 10 years is still temporary, um, to pursue this other thing in to the greatest extent possible, or to whatever degree that you are motivated to.
Hmm. Interesting, Jim. What are you thinking on this?
I see where you're going with that. I think it's just a terminology issue because I can see how you define growth by, I guess its definition, that too much growth in too many areas with a very small amount of growth really isn't growth. It's just kind of fleeting interest, I guess. So there is a negative side of growth. I can see where you're going with that. The negative, or sorry, the positive side of fixed, I guess, is that yes, you can fix yourself. You can focus on that individual thing to be the best you possibly can, while restricting growth in other areas to allot your time to that more effectively. I think there's also a negative, or I guess a negative aspect to that view of fixed, is that fixed could be a negative in the sense it might be obsessive. So you can fix yourself too much to the point where maybe you should be growing in other areas, but you're obsessed with you're fixed or obsessed with this particular area trying to get better, when there may be some diminishing returns on that avenue where you could be growing. So I see where you're going with that. Maybe get away from the terminology, but there is positive and negative aspects to each of those thought processes and where you allocate your energy.
Absolutely. Sean, what are you thinking?
Again, just like the fella's saying, maybe it's just a terminology thing, but rather than me thinking about a fixed mindset with applying growth mindset against it, I think a fixed target, I might have a fixed target called try to learn how to be a good podcaster so that I can help my buddies. Let's call that the fixed target. But it's a fixed generalized target. It's not a localized target. It's a fixed 360 target, we'll call it, called try to be helpful. But I'm applying my growth mindset against the fixed general target. And I don't even know what the target looks like right now, but I don't need to. I'm just heading in a general direction called the target. And my process will figure it out along the way. And along the way means like not today, it means over the next few years. If I give myself a long enough timeline, I'll figure out where I need to be at the end of this, but I don't know where it is now. It all is very fluidized and shapes itself up just through intention, through hard effort, through being focused, by trying to do it right, by using a growth mindset process against a fixed target that I don't understand yet. I know I end up where I'm supposed to end up, but it doesn't mean that I feel like I've got it figured out today, and it won't feel like I've got it figured out tomorrow. That is the point that I want to make in this little thread right now that we're discussing is no matter what I start that's new, podcasting is new to me still. But when I started it off just over a year ago, it was so new to me that I didn't even know where my left and right arcs were. And I've tried to explore my left and right arcs in this thing. And by going too far one way and too far the other way, I've screwed up. Like I've said some dumb things, I've done some dumb things, I look dumb sometimes. And it's because I've had to figure out my arcs of fire, bouncing off the edges of the wall with my hair on fire. And through exploring and being adventurous and moving into the complexity and being puzzled by it, I've had to move forward. I've had to retreat. I've had to throw smoke off on the left flank so I can right flank it. And I've done a whole pile of things in podcasting that people like would shake their head like and say that was dumb. Well, it was dumb, but that's what I have to do for me to learn my process. So I want to put this across that when I started this or when I start anything, I've got a general theme somewhere down the road of years from now that I don't know what it looks like. I know that initially I'll be uncomfortable. And then several months later, I'm going to be freaking mega uncomfortable, hating on it, not wanting to do it, not wanting to be there, not thinking that I can figure it out, not thinking that I deserve to figure it out. That's me. I go through this nebulous period of time. It can be anywhere from a half a year to a year where I don't feel like I'm in control of my process, even though I am. I feel like I don't understand that I'm going to have success. In fact, I start to feel like I'm going backwards. But it's a process that I understand because I've done it so many times. But even when it's happening to me, I feel like I'm screwing up my process because it feels so freaking uncomfortable. So, for anyone out there who has started something new and after several months they feel either their imposter syndrome's flaring up or they feel like they dot, dot, dot can't get it going, I think it's natural. I think it's normal. And I think that everyone just needs to stay in the game for those several months or that approximate year, maybe for you. Just stay in the game. And eventually it starts to feel better. Not amazing, but better. And so that's where I'm at right now. I've just kind of come through the uncomfortable phase of freaking podcasting. Now I am more relaxed and excited, I suppose, to see where it goes. And I still don't know where it'll go, but because I'm relaxed now, I've gone through my uncomfortable phase. I'm I'm looking forward to what's around the corner. I'm looking forward to the adventurous part now that I can relax into and enjoy the game.
Yeah. It podcasting as a whole is an interesting realm, and I think I remember when I first started, and I hated the sound of my own voice, and I hated the picture that I was seeing whenever I was recording, and it bothered me. So I would focus on who I was talking to until I had done it enough times that I got used to the sound of my own voice. I got used to the fact that I was in the camera frame. I got used to all these things that allowed me to um, do all of the podcasting. There was times that I would sit there and trying to engineer the audio initially and just like be pulling my hair out going, why am I even doing this? But I would still do it. And I would hate on the fact that I had to figure out a new video editing software and freaking like, oh, it's so aggravating. But I'd still sit there for the next 3 hours watching YouTube videos trying to figure out how to do it better because I wanted to provide the information to those around us. So I love the fact that you brought that up, brought that up, Sean, because it's such a big part of that process of not enjoying what you're doing in that moment and still doing it, and then waking up the next day and doing it again and doing it again. And I love the line you used to say was you used to bungee cord your phone to a tree and then stare into the eye of Sauron. That was fantastic. It's such a great example of what it is, what it's like to start in this realm. Now we are almost at 2 hours here, and I wanted to ask you this same question that I've been asking everybody in the last little while is, what is your major takeaway from the last 2 hours of conversation? You know, what is the thing that you're going to walk away from this conversation with and move forward in your life with? Jim, you got a big smirk on your face. I'm coming to you first.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it just popped into my head before the show. We are talking about the new format here. You get 2 hours instead of 1 hour, and you made the comment that because we have the extra time, we can really scratch that that itch and make sure it's gone. I don't feel that with this conversation. I think it's just such a big topic. There's so many ways you could do it. Like we've got this language of the internet that can't be distilled down into a 2 hour conversation. So I would disagree with you on that statement that you made before the show. That I don't think we scratched all this. I don't think we can possibly scratch all this. And I'm going to do some research later because I've got some things nagging me now. So good conversation though.
Yeah, absolutely. But what about is that your takeaway from the whole conversation though?
Oh no. The Yeah, no, sorry, that's the first thing that popped into my head. Yeah, I'm taking away the language of the internet. I think is the biggest thing. There is a I don't want to say I don't want to call it like a gap here, but people who have not grown up with this language, it is different. It is new, and we have to insert ourselves into that language and truly understand to be fluent speakers because we are leaders. We're of that generation where we're going to be imparting some wisdom that may not be extracted from the type of learning that other people are doing. So we have to, I guess, really understand that language so that we can impart some of our messages, our leadership wisdom in a different way that we don't currently understand. And I think that is experienced through social media for a lot of people, and we have to figure out how to do that most effectively.
Absolutely. Greg, how about yourself? Any major takeaways?
Yeah, the big one for me is I think I had the chance to really recognize a gap in my knowledge and ability in whenever it came up. How do you get someone from fixed to growth mindset? How do you get them to go from spectator to participant? And I think it's easy to just say, well, I'm just going to say some really inspirational things and, post some really ingenious quotes by somebody else who's really smart. And the reality is that that doesn't really work because that's not what's going to take someone across that threshold. So now the question that I want to explore more is what does take someone across that threshold, and how can I kind of help tug people across it a little more easily and more consistently. Not easily necessarily, but more reliably, I guess I should say.
I like that. Sean, what are your takeaways from today's convo?
My takeaway is this that, and I've got the luxury of listening to the two fellas go before me, so I've got time to formulate my idea. And it's this that I'm lucky. I'm lucky in life, that's for sure. How I got to the position that I'm at right now, where I'm listening to two super smart guys that I guess, look up to. It's how does a person end up where in this spot? I think you've got to have lived a pretty good life to get to a point where you're at a pretty good life. And there was a point in my life when I was young that I wasn't in a good life. But over my life, I've got to a point where I'm living a good life through a process where I can certainly evaluate how well I'm doing things by the company I keep. Now, the company I keep doesn't necessarily have to be who I go and meet for coffee every Saturday afternoon. That's not my only friends. My friends are the people that I interact with in this moment. The people that I look up to are the people I interact with in this moment. If I'm interacting with people that aren't making my life better or the world better, then what am I really doing? So I guess my takeaway is I've snapped into focus that I might be the luckiest guy in the world to be able to do what I'm doing right now. So I'm thankful for it.
That's a great realization. I would contend that because I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be able to do this because this is awesome. Jim earlier had commented or had complimented me on the the guests that have been on the show and when we were talking in the green room and the you know the knowledge that we have, the knowledge base that we have, and I had to really thank him and really think about the fact that the network that has been built upon with the collective has been friends who recommend friends who recommend friends who recommend friends, and this is kind of expanded to such a degree now that I have so many recommendations of people that should be on the show. I don't even know who recommended them anymore. And there are people that are coming on the show next week who are like, I don't know where I've heard of you, but cool, you're on the show. This is going to be fun. And I think that's part and parcel of what we've been talking about, is that there was a point somewhere last year that I learned my own language. And once I learned my own language, I was able to impart it upon everybody else. And so when I started engaging new people and started engaging new guests and new thought processes and new topics, I was able to then pass that on to the next person. And then they were like, hey, man, you know who you should talk to? This person. And you know who that person said I should talk to? Greg. And you know who that person said I should talk to? A bunch of other people, right? That we've had on the show since then. And it started with the fact that I took the time to learn my own language. So my takeaway from this is that we should all take the time to learn how our own language within ourselves so that we can better impart it to the world around us. With that, I just want to say thank you guys. This has been a fantastic conversation. This has been, you know what? The funny thing is, normally I say, hey, I have all these timestamps. I don't this time because I was so involved in the conversation. I didn't actually write down any of the timestamps that I need. So I'm going to be watching this again later. Thank you guys. This has been awesome. Jim, Greg, Sean, fantastic. Any final thoughts actually before I shut her down from any of the panel? No, all good. Well then,
I've thought too much today already.
Well then, we'll see y'all next week. Chimo, everybody.
Chimo.
Hey Collective, Big Bird here. Thanks so much for watching the episode. Really appreciate the support. It has been fantastic recording these and having these conversations. I can't thank you enough. If you'd like to watch any other ones, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to listen to another awesome convo, I got one right here. Your choice. Chimo.